And for centuries, people believed glaciers destroyed everything: bodies, weapons, entire histories, frozen, crushed, erased. They were wrong. In 1999, climbers crossing a melting glacier in Norway noticed something dark beneath the ice. At first, it looked like driftwood. Then they saw fingers, human fingers. The body looked impossible. Skin still attached. Clothing still intact, even facial features remained. But that wasn't the strangest part. The man had been dead for nearly 1,000 years, and somehow the glacier had protected him. What they found shocked everyone. So what really happened? For generations, Vikings were remembered for one thing: violence. Stories painted them as raiders who appeared suddenly, then disappeared into history just as quickly. But high in the frozen mountains of Scandinavia, something survived them. Something waiting beneath ancient ice. The body discovered in that glacier wasn't buried in a tomb. There were no ceremonial stones, no massive ship grave, no gold, just one man, alone. Frozen in silence for nearly a millennium. At first, researchers believed the answer was simple: a traveler lost in a snowstorm, a hunter trapped in the mountains, case closed. But then something changed. The clothing was too well preserved, the tools beside him didn't match the official timeline, and one strange detail kept bothering scientists: the body showed no signs of panic. No defensive wounds, no desperate struggle to survive. It looked almost peaceful, as if the man had simply laid down and never stood up again. Why? And why was he crossing one of the deadliest frozen regions in Norway completely alone? No one expected what came next. The glacier itself began revealing more objects: shows wooden sled fragments, animal bones, broken arrows, ancient pathways hidden beneath ice for centuries. Suddenly, the discovery became something larger, much larger, because the glacier wasn't preserving one accident. It was preserving an entire forgotten world, and the deeper researchers looked, the stranger the story became. The mountains of Norway are brutal in winter. Winds scream through narrow valleys. Temperatures fall low enough to freeze exposed skin within minutes. Even today, crossing those regions alone is dangerous. 1,000 years ago, it was nearly impossible. Yet Vikings traveled there constantly. Not for exploration, not for conquest, but for survival. During the Viking Age, trade routes stretched across Scandinavia like veins: fur, iron, walrus ivory, tools, food. Everything moved through dangerous mountain passes, and one of those passes crossed directly beneath the glacier where the body was found. For centuries, the route disappeared beneath growing ice. Then the climate changed, the glacier slowly retreated, and history emerged with it. Researchers later identified the body as a man likely between 30 and 40 years old. His clothing was made from wool and animal hide. Simple, practical, not rich, not royal, but carefully made. His shoes became one of the biggest surprises. They were crafted with remarkable precision. Insulated for snow travel, designed for long-distance movement across ice. This wasn't an inexperienced traveler. This man knew the mountains, which raised another question. How did someone so experienced die there? Scientists examined every inch of the remains: bones, teeth, muscle, tissue. Even fragments of stomach contents survived. The cold had preserved him almost perfectly. It felt less like archaeology, and more like a time capsule. Then came another strange detail. The body was positioned face down, one arm bent beneath the chest, almost as if he collapsed suddenly while walking. But there were no major injuries, no broken bones, no weapon wounds, no evidence of attack. The official explanation seemed obvious: exposure, hypothermia. A sudden blizzard. But one researcher noticed something odd. The clothing wasn't heavily damaged by storm conditions. His equipment remained organized. Nothing appeared scattered. It didn't look like a chaotic death. It looked controlled, intentional, almost. And that question has never been fully answered. As excavations continued, more artifacts emerged from the glacier. Hundreds of them ancient horseshoes, walking sticks, leather straps, fragments of textiles, even dung from pack animals survived beneath the ice. The glacier had preserved an entire Viking travel route, a route historians barely knew existed. This changed everything researchers believed about movement through ancient Scandinavia. The Vikings weren't just coastal raiders, they were mountain travelers, merchants, survivors, and suddenly the frozen body became more important than anyone expected because he represented a missing piece of history. But then something changed. Researchers discovered the body wasn't alone. Not physically, but historically, other remains began appearing nearby: animal skeletons, discarded tools, lost supplies, evidence of repeated journeys across the same deadly terrain. For centuries, ice had hidden all of it. Now the glacier was giving it back. One object especially disturbed archaeologists: a wooden walking staff. At first, it seemed ordinary, until they realized how carefully it had been carved. Symbols covered parts of the handle, tiny marks almost invisible beneath ice damage. Nobody could fully translate them. Some believed they were ownership markings, others thought they carried spiritual meaning. But one thing became clear: the man crossing that glacier wasn't random. He'd prepared carefully before entering the mountains. And experienced travelers rarely vanish without reason. Researchers started reconstructing his final journey. He likely traveled with pack animals. He carried basic survival equipment. His clothing suggests late autumn or early winter, the worst possible time to cross. Why risk it? Trade urgency? Religious pilgrimage? Escape? No answer fully fit. And then scientists examined the ice layers themselves. That changed the timeline completely. The body had not frozen immediately after death. For a short period, it remained exposed before being sealed beneath snow and shifting ice, which meant something terrifying. For days, maybe weeks, dead man lay alone in the mountains before the glacier claimed him forever. No burial, no rescue, no recovery attempt. Nothing. How could a heavily used trade route simply abandon someone there? Unless nobody knew where he disappeared, or worse, nobody wanted to search for him. This is where the story gets strange. A review of Viking records revealed repeated references to dangerous mountain crossings during periods of climate instability, sudden storms, disappearing travelers. Entire caravans lost without trace. Some routes gained terrible reputations. People feared them. Even experienced guides avoided certain passes during specific seasons. Old Norse stories described mountains as living places, hungry places, where spirits buried travelers beneath snow. Modern historians dismissed those accounts as myth until bodies started emerging from the ice. Perfectly preserved, silent waiting. Then came the discovery that reframed everything: pollen trapped inside the man's clothing, tiny particles invisible to the naked eye. Researchers traced them to regions far from the glacier. The man had traveled enormous distances before his death, much farther than expected for ordinary traders. And suddenly, one terrifying possibility emerged. What if he wasn't simply crossing the mountains? What if he was carrying something important enough to risk death for? Scientists searched again through recovered artifacts. Carefully, slowly, and buried beneath layers of melting ice, they found another object: a small wooden box, cracked by centuries of pressure, bound with iron fittings. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Until they opened it, inside were remnants of cloth, animal fat, and traces of something wrapped carefully long ago. But whatever had been inside was gone. No one expected what came next. Chemical analysis revealed unusual residue within the box. Not food, not tools, not medicine. The compounds suggested preservation materials. Something had once been protected inside, something valuable. Suddenly, the frozen traveler no longer looked like an unlucky victim. He looked like a courier, and couriers carried secrets. Researchers revisited every detail of the body: his route, his equipment. His timing, parts emerged, dangerous patterns. The journey made little economic sense. No large trading settlement existed near his final destination. No major markets, no military outposts. Why cross deadly mountains during unstable weather carrying a sealed container? And why was the container empty? Questions multiplied faster than answers. Some historians proposed robbery. But valuables remained untouched beside the body. Others suggested religious transport, sacred relics hidden during regional conflict, yet no church records mentioned missing artifacts. Then another detail surfaced. The traveler's clothing showed repairs made using materials from different regions of Scandinavia. He had traveled constantly, possibly for years. And one repair thread matched textile styles linked to elite Viking households. That changed the entire investigation because ordinary couriers rarely interacted with powerful families. Who exactly was this man? A merchant? A messenger? A smuggler? Something worse? The glacier kept its silence, but evidence continued emerging from the melting ice, and every discovery made the story darker. Researchers eventually mapped the ancient trail completely. The route connected isolated communities, once believed disconnected from Viking trade networks. Entire regions of history had been misunderstood. The frozen body became headline news across Europe, not because of violence, but because of preservation. People stared into the reconstructed face of a man dead for 1,000 years. He looked human, uncomfortably human, not like a museum skeleton, not like ancient history. Like someone sleeping beneath snow, children recognized his shoes, his coat, his posture. It shattered distance between past and present, and that frightened people more than they admitted, because if one man survived the centuries beneath ice, how many others remained hidden? How many stories were still frozen there? Then scientists made one final discovery before winter forced excavation teams away. A second set of tracks preserved beneath older ice layers, not modern, ancient. Another traveler had once crossed near the same location, moving in the opposite direction. The spacing suggested urgency, possibly running. And beside those tracks, they found fragments of red wool cloth matching fibers from the dead man's clothing. Everything pointed toward one conclusion: the Viking traveler had not been alone. Someone else was there, someone who survived, but there was one thing nobody had checked, one forgotten record hidden inside a medieval archive. A record describing a missing messenger who vanished crossing frozen mountains nearly 1,000 years ago. The description matched perfectly: same season, same route, same destination. But one line changed everything. The messenger had been transporting an object considered dangerous enough to disappear forever, an object authorities never recovered. And that question has never been fully answered because somewhere beneath those glaciers, something may still be waiting. The frozen body changed history. At first, researchers believed they had found a tragic accident, one lost Viking, one deadly storm, one frozen grave, Sybil, but the glacier kept revealing more: artifacts, tracks, hidden pathways. And then came the record of a missing messenger carrying something dangerous enough to vanish from history completely. Suddenly, the body beneath the ice no longer looked random. It looked connected. Connected to something people were never supposed to find. Now the investigation became far more serious. Scientists returned to the glacier with new technology. Ground-penetrating radar scanned layers of ancient ice. Drones mapped routes hidden beneath snow. Every object recovered was cataloged carefully, because now researchers believed they weren't studying a victim. They were studying a mission. The body itself still held clues. Analysis of his teeth revealed a diet rich in fish and preserved meat, typical for long-distance travelers. But chemical signatures inside his bones told a stranger story. The man had spent time in several different regions across Scandinavia during his life, possibly Denmark, possibly Iceland, even northern Britain. He moved constantly. That mattered, because ordinary farmers rarely traveled that far during the Viking Age. Messengers did, traders did, seas did, and this is where the story gets strange. Researchers studying medieval Norse records found scattered references to trusted couriers carrying sealed items between powerful clans. Not gold, not weapons, information, letters, agreements, maps, sometimes relics. These couriers traveled alone to avoid attracting attention, fast, quiet, forgettable, exactly like the man found beneath the glacier. But then something changed. A tiny cut mark was discovered on one of his ribs, almost invisible. At first, scientists dismissed it as damage caused by ice movement. But the wound showed signs of occurring before death. Someone had injured him, not severely, but intentionally. That single detail reopened everything. If another traveler had crossed nearby and the dead man carried something valuable, then robbery became possible again. But one detail still didn't fit. Nothing else was stolen. His knife remained beside him. His clothing stayed intact. His supplies were untouched. Why leave valuables behind? Unless the attacker wanted only one thing. The missing object. Researchers reconstructed weather conditions from ice samples. A violent storm likely struck the region within hours of the man's death. Veldicized would have collapsed instantly. Snow, wind, darkness, perfect conditions for someone to disappear forever. And maybe perfect conditions for murder. No one expected what came next. DNA testing on hair fragments recovered from the traveler's cloak revealed traces from another individual. A second person had worn or handled the garment shortly before death. The DNA was incomplete, too degraded for full identification, but it confirmed one terrifying possibility. The dead man had not crossed the glacier alone. For years, archaeologists debated what happened next. Did companions abandon him? Did someone attack him during the storm? Or did both travelers become trapped separately in the snow? Then another discovery surfaced. Buried deep beneath retreating ice, researchers uncovered fragments of a second leather shoe, different size, different stitching style, not belonging to the frozen beady. A second traveler had definitely been there, and suddenly investigators started asking a darker question. What if the glacier wasn't preserving one death? What if it was preserving a chase? Ancient stories from the region suddenly gained new attention. Legends spoke of mountain couriers pursued through blizzards, men carrying forbidden items between rival powers. Some stories described sacred objects disappearing into snow forever. Historians once ignored those tales. Now they sounded disturbingly plausible. One medieval text described a messenger who fell beneath the white mouth of the mountain, while the shadow behind him survived. Nobody understood the phrase. Until now, because glaciers move slowly. They consume, they hide, and sometimes they return what they take. Researchers expanded excavations across nearby ice fields. What they found shocked everyone. Another cluster of artifacts emerged nearly 2 kilometers away. Horse equipment, food containers, broken sled pieces, and buried beneath rock and snow, human bones, partial remains only, scattered, damaged by centuries of shifting ice, but enough survived for analysis. The bones belonged to another adult male, similar age to the frozen traveler, and one fracture changed everything. The skull showed evidence of violent, blunt force trauma. Someone struck this man before death. Suddenly, the peaceful image of a traveler, dying quietly in snow, collapsed completely. Violence had occurred in those mountains. Real violence, and researchers noticed something even stranger. The second skeleton showed signs of exposure after injury, meaning the man survived temporarily after being attacked. He tried moving, tried escaping, then disappeared beneath snow forever. This wasn't an accident anymore. It looked like conflict, possibly pursuit, possibly betrayal, and that question has never been fully answered. Theories exploded across Europe. Some believed rival traders fought over valuable cargo. Others suspected political secrets moving between Viking rulers. One theory frightened historians most: religious conflict. During the late Viking Age, Scandinavia was changing rapidly. Christianity spread across northern kingdoms. Old Norse beliefs weakened. Power shifted constantly. Some leaders converted publicly, while secretly protecting older traditions. That created enemies. Dangerous enemies. What if the missing object carried through the glacier was connected to that struggle? A sacred relic? A forbidden document? Evidence powerful enough to threaten someone? Then came the biggest revelation of all. Scientists re-examined residue from the cracked wooden box discovered near the frozen body. Advanced chemical testing identified traces of beeswax, herbs, and rare oils. Preservation materials, but attached to those traces were microscopic particles of pigment, red pigment, extremely rare red pigment, the kind used in illuminated medieval manuscripts and sacred objects. Not ordinary cargo, not trade goods, something protected carefully from moisture and decay, possibly parchment, possibly painted wood, possibly something even more valuable. Researchers suddenly realized the missing object may not have been treasure, it may have been knowledge. A document. And if true, what information was important enough for someone to risk crossing deadly glaciers during winter? The investigation widened again. Historians searched monastery records across Scandinavia. Most revealed nothing, until one damaged archive in Denmark mentioned a missing courier connected to a dispute between Christian clergy and regional Norse leaders. The record was incomplete. Parts destroyed by fire centuries earlier, but one sentence survived. The object must not fall into hostile hands. No description followed. Nothing about its appearance, nothing about its contents. Only fear, fear preserved across 1,000 years. This is where the story gets truly unsettling, because throughout history, information has always been dangerous. Maps changed empires, letters started wars. Religious texts reshaped civilizations. And somewhere inside frozen mountains, a Viking messenger vanished, carrying something powerful enough to disappear from history itself. The glacier protected the body. But it may also be protecting the secret. Researchers eventually reconstructed the final hours of the traveler's journey. The weather worsened rapidly. Wedvisisum collapsed. At least 2 men moved across the pass during the storm. One suffered violent injury. The other collapsed face down in snow. The object vanished, and nobody ever returned for it. Why? That detail haunted investigators most, because valuable cargo is usually recovered eventually. Unless searching became impossible, or forbidden. Years passed after the discovery. More ice melted. More artifacts emerged. Ancient gloves, arrow shafts, but never the missing object. Then one summer, radar equipment detected something unusual beneath deeper ice layers near exposed rock. A rectangular shape, too symmetrical to be natural. Excavation teams worked carefully for days. Ice melted slowly around the object. Everyone expected another sled fragment, another supply box. Instead, they uncovered a wooden chest reinforced with iron bands, larger than the first container, sealed shut. The wood was badly damaged but still intact. For nearly 1,000 years, it remained trapped beneath moving ice. Nobody spoke while researchers opened it. Inside, they found cloth fragments, animal fur, and a smaller wrapped bundle preserved beneath layers of wax. Hands shook opening it. The bundle contained thin wooden tablets covered in faded carvings, runes, ancient Norse writing. Most were badly damaged, but several lines survived, enough to translate fragments. Enough to terrify historians. The tablets described secret negotiations between Viking leaders during the spread of Christianity across Scandinavia, conflicts hidden from official records, promises, threats, disappearances, and one repeated phrase appeared again and again. The old knowledge must survive. Nobody expected that, because history often portrays Viking conversion as gradual and peaceful. The tablets suggested something darker: tunnel division, fear, possibly violence. Suddenly, the frozen courier looked less like a random traveler and more like part of a hidden political network. Someone transporting forbidden records through isolated mountain routes, and maybe someone tried stopping him, but then came the detail that changed everything. One damaged line described the keeper beneath the ice. Researchers debated the translation for months. Some argued it referred symbolically to hidden knowledge, others believed it described an actual person. A courier, chosen to protect the records if capture became inevitable. If true, if frozen body may not have failed his mission, he may have completed it because the documents survived. Buried safely beneath the glacier for 1,000 years. And that question has never been fully answered. The discovery triggered enormous debate across Europe. Some historians warned against exaggeration. Others called the Glacier site one of the most important Viking discoveries ever made. Not because of gold, not because of war, because it revealed fear, human fear. Fear of losing identity during a changing world. That made the story feel strangely modern. Civilizations always believe their systems will last forever. Then history shifts, religions change. Borders collapse. Cultures disappear. And ordinary people become trapped between worlds. The frozen man lived during exactly such a moment. A world transforming around him. Old beliefs fading. New powers rising. Maybe he understood that. Maybe that's why he crossed the mountains despite the danger, not for wealth, not for glory, but to preserve something, a message, a truth, a memory. There's something haunting about that idea because nobody remembers his real name, no descendants came searching, no grave marker carried his story. For 1,000 years, he remained alone beneath moving ice, while entire kingdoms vanished above him. Yet somehow, his mission survived. Researchers studying the tablets noticed another painful detail. Many names mentioned within the writings disappeared completely from official Scandinavian records shortly afterward, erased, almost deliberately. That frightened historians more than the discovery itself. Because history is often written by survivors, and survivors decide what gets forgotten. The glacier interrupted that process. It preserved what others lost or tried to erase. Today, melting ice continues revealing objects across Norway's mountains. Every year, archaeologists recover new artifacts from retreating glaciers, shows, tools, letters, bones. The past is returning piece by piece, and each discovery carries the same warning. History is never truly gone. Sometimes it's only buried waiting. The frozen Viking became more than a scientific discovery. He became evidence that ordinary people carried extraordinary secrets through dangerous times. People history almost erased completely. And somewhere beneath those mountains, there may still be more. More bodies, more documents, more truths hidden beneath ancient ice because glaciers melt slowly. But eventually, they reveal everything. The kingdoms that sent those messengers are gone. The rulers vanished. The conflicts faded into dust, but the man beneath the glacier remained silent, preserved, watching centuries pass above him. And somewhere, right now, beneath melting Scandinavian ice, another secret may already be waiting to emerge. We just haven't found it yet.